Well, first of all, I want to say Assalamu alaikum to all of the Muslims in the chat, and especially to SK Ali. We'll be doing the usual with our author interviews. We'll be having a half an hour long interview with Sajida. It's Sajida, right? That's how you pronounce it?
Yes, perfect, yeah.
Okay, great, fantastic. So we'll be having our interview with Sajida, and then after we'll do the Q&A. But we have two special guests, two Muslim book reviewers, Sumaya and Tahirah, who will be asking questions first, and then we'll get into everybody else's questions. And we might have a couple more questions submitted by Muslims in the community that we might answer first. So first of all, Sajida, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to know, before we get into the questions, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and the books that you've written and stuff like
that. Okay, so I'm Sajida. I go by SKLE, and I've written two YA novels, Saints and Misfits, Love from A to Z. I'm just going to hold them up in case. So this is Saints and Misfits, Love from A to Z in hardback, and it's coming out next Tuesday in paperback, and I just got copies of it, and it's just beautiful. Like, yeah, it has like it's so cute in the back. It has a little yellow
love it.
Blurred part, and it's really glossy, and I just want to show you the spine because it's so cute. It's like so those are my YA novels. I also have I'm a co-editor of an anthology called Once Upon an Eid. It came out May 5th that we're really excited about. My co-editor is Aisha Saeed, and it has 15 amazing Muslim creatives who contributed, and it's just wonderful. I want to talk about this more a bit after. I also have, I don't know if you can see, The Proudest Blue, which is a picture book up there on my wall. So those are my books, and I think I love writing all kinds of things for different age groups, but my really special love is YA, writing YA.
And you're definitely good at it. So you were just talking about one of your most recent releases, which is Once Upon an Eid, which, by the way, is fantastic. I was privileged enough to read an arc of it. It came out on May 5th. And I wanted to know if you could tell us about Once Upon an Eid, and what, I mean, you kind of told us what it is already. It's a short story anthology, and it's about Eid. So it highlights different young Muslims on Eid, and we have different authors contributing to the collection. So I wanted to know, why do you feel like Eid was an important thing to highlight in a middle grade novel?
Yeah, so Once Upon an Eid really came out of my thought at the end of 2017, because Saints and Misfits came out in a year when there was more diverse books coming out. And I started to notice that a lot of them were centering pain and around marginalized identities. And I started to think, like, what does it feel like to be a young person growing up and seeing only like your identity as kind of like equated to sources of stress? And I was thinking, what would the opposite look like? It would look like joyous and hopeful and like funny and fun and those kind of stories. And so when I thought of like a way to like knit Muslim contributors together, I thought of Eid, because that's something that's common to like the Muslim Ummah. Means community, and the community of Muslims is global. So when I went to Aisha Saeed with the idea, and then we went out to, we approached authors and writers, they were all like on board, because Eid, the word Eid, like we describe in the introduction, it conjures joy for a lot of people. So that was like the reasoning behind focusing on Eid. It was a way to like connect our community around a certain theme that everyone would feel like a sense of, not everyone, sorry, I should never say everyone, because holidays are different for different people for, reasons. And so like the authors we reached out to did feel that sense of like they could provide a story with hope. Just like working on it, I just wanted to add this one. I would, text each other crying emojis, because of all the, like, it felt like a treasure box. Like when we'd looking through these stories, it was just like so amazing. The contributions that everyone brought, and it was really like we just felt so much glee doing it, and that's what we hope we give to readers of any background.
Definitely, and it was an amazing collection. I really enjoyed it, and the thing about it too is that it came out in May, so in the middle of quarantine. So and a lot of authors who we've been interviewing have had a lot of reflections about publishing during this time. So I wanted to know if you had any reflections about what the publishing process was like during this time.
Yeah, so it was when we thought about it, like when we actually thought about, and people started talking about what it's like to have a book release come out in a global pandemic. There was like obviously some worry and just wonder of how that looks, but it was an opportunity for us to kind of put the theme of this collection, which is hope and joy, into like action, because it was like, okay, so are we going to take this as like a bad thing, or are we going to look for the good things in it? And I think it wasn't just us who did that. I just felt like a lot of people, around different communities came together to try to like make some joy. Like even this initiative that, I'm participating in, like Quarantine Pages, like that's so amazing. And it's just like, it just shows like the human spirit to like, to just think of ways to still find something to connect on that's happy and fun. So and then also I found that there was like more people reading because there was more time. People had more time. They were at home. Yeah, so I felt like it was okay in the end, and there was a lot of people, and it was also Eid was like around the corner when the book came out. So yeah, so all of that was like good timing for everything.
Yeah. Definitely. So working our way back to your debut, Saints and Misfits, it was the first book I read from you back in 2017. I remember I was actually in Canada and I bought it and I read it and I was like, this book is amazing. So the book came out during the height of the Me Too movement, and it is a story about assault. And the importance about victims speaking up. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Jana and her journey with that, and why you felt it necessary to write a story about a young Muslim girl who was dealing with that situation in her life.
Yeah, so I'm like a firm believer in like not shying away from issues of social justice, and but I'm also like, it's hard for me to like process how that will look like in terms of like, how do we talk about it in a way that actually has buy-in from everyone? And for me, that's writing a book, in like a whole book. And it was also to give voice to like someone who'd gone through a similar journey to Jenna in my own life. It was a way to like capture that for people going through what it's like to process and sexual violence and taking away your voice, and how you come to a space of like reclaiming it and shouting and like doing something about it. Also, like I wanted to like look at how the house involves support, and that was why like I've put a lot of emphasis in Jenna's communities, because she has different communities that she belongs to. So, and just to emphasize that whatever issue you're going through, there's like support is so important to like process that and to come out of it resilient. So it was just important for me to write that as personally, and for it to be out there for anybody with the same, what's going on in their lives, and for others to know what it's like to stand up to a monster.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an excellent story, and that was the book that really got me to fall in love with your work. So I love that you were able to achieve that with this story. And one of the things I liked about it was obviously the Muslim representation. It was one of the first, I think it was the second book. I think Aisha Saeed's Written in the Stars was the first book I read that had Muslim rep in it. But this was the second book that I read that had Muslim rep in it. And it was so cool, and I related so much to the character. And one of the things I liked about it the most is the way that it kind of critically addresses the issue of sainthood in the Muslim community, and how some people are, often uplifted as saints while others are seen as not enough misfits. So that's where you kind of get like the title. But in reality, obviously, we know it's more complicated than that. So I wanted to know, why do you feel it was important to address this dynamic as it relates to the Muslim community?
So I think like the expectation of perfection is really harmful, and that like sometimes like religious communities fixate on the wrong kind of um, idea of perfection, which is outer perfection. And I come from a strong understanding that like that our paths can look different, that there are many doors to Jannah, and like not Jannah the character, but Jannah, and that not everyone like not what you see on the outside or people's like overt, you know, outside determines who they really are, but it's really like what you're on, you know, what your internal process is, and not the external expressions of faith. And then there's also like I find as just thinking about growing up as a Muslim, sometimes there's a focus on like you need to be X, Y, and Z to be like the perfect Muslim. And but the sources like of our faith show that there were so many different kinds of Muslims, and there was different kinds of ways to be, and it was still good, and it was still okay, and it was, you know. So like I just feel like lately there's been like just like a push towards this is the way, and I'm like, no, that's not the only way. And so that was my like I just thought it was an important thing for like young people and old people, everybody, to just kind of think about, because really like who you are is determined by your relationship with the source of it all, and that's something nobody can see except you know. So
Yeah, I love that. That is exactly how I feel, and that's why I love this book and related to it so much. And I think that's why your work resonates with so much Muslim reviewers. And the thing about this book is that you've mentioned on social media that there is a sequel coming out, which
yeah.
is pretty exciting. By the way, I just love how you have pictures of your books like behind you. Like it's just it's amazing. I love.
I did this because before I had like my books on the shelf there, and it was like the different like when they did a reprint, they'd send me a new copy, and I had all that, and it was just like cluttery, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try for I'm not a very minimalist person, I'm very cluttery, but I was like, this part I'm gonna try to make it streamlined. So
I love it.
that's the only ways I have my books up there. Yeah.
I love it. I really love it. But yeah, sorry to dive in, but I just had to say that. But the sequel is coming out, so I wanted to know what you could tell us about the sequel, like what details you could give us, as much as you could, and like what could we expect from Jana's journey as we see it continue.
Yeah. So the sequel really came from my understanding that a lot of young readers, because I write for young readers, like I don't write for reviewers or adults, or, you know, I write for young readers. And when I was seeing that a lot of young readers felt like the ending wasn't like satisfying enough, and I realized I did kind of like what a lot of adult fiction does, which is like it just kind of leaves it open, right? And adults like that kind of ending, because I'm not making blanket statements, but a lot of adults seem
No, that's true,
like that kind of like, oh, you know. And I felt like a lot of my young readers wanted to see Jenna go towards like know where she was and firmly, and like, so I talked to my editor and I said, like, can we continue Jenna's journey? So in this book, Jenna's on another journey of growth. And I'm excited about it because it's set in a very tight time frame of 3 days. It's all around her brother's wedding. It's a wedding weekend, and Jenna has to like grapple with what love looks like, not just romantic love, but love in its myriad ways. But I'm going to tell you that she had two more people get introduced into her life that she has to decide her heart about. And so it's not just focused only on Noah, but there's things that she has to figure out. And the cover really kind of the cover's been ready since January, And the cover really kind of like captures that like what's going on in her life. Yeah. I can't wait to share it.
I'm internally screaming right now, but I have to remain professional. So I'm so excited for that. I'm so excited. As soon as I'm going to pre-order that, y'all look out for it. I'm so ready for that.
Thank you.
But yes, that's going to be amazing. But now I want to bring it down to Love from A to Z, which is your most recent YA novel, and which has my heart, which has many readers' heart. Yes, it's amazing. God, and that cover is just stunning.
Yes, I love the cover.
So and the new cover is really nice too. So one thing I love about the book is that it's a romance story and it kind of subverts the typical shy, quiet girl versus the outspoken boy who's like broody and not emotional or whatever. Adam is very soft and very gentle, whereas Zainab is the more outspoken one. So I wanted to know, like, did you intentionally want to subvert those stereotypes for young reviewers, or is that just how the characters came to you, or was it like maybe a combination of both?
No, I was just writing my reality. I was writing like, I see gentle and soft men around me all the time. I have them in my life, and I'm actually surrounded by them. And I don't get to see that. Like my dad is like, he cries like visibly, like more than my mom, like for anything. He'll just cry, like for happiness, for different things. And so and then my sons and my husbands, and like it just there's just so many people who have that personality that I don't get to see. And then also like just being the mom of two young men, and like seeing their vulnerabilities around love and falling in love, and not like, and sometimes I think back and go, oh, when I was young, I wish I'd known this side of like whoever I had a crush on or whoever I liked. I wish I'd known that part of them. And so that was my like reason for wanting to write a dual point of view, because I wanted to show the process that from both sides of like what it feels like in the different personalities. Yeah, and it wasn't really honestly on any gender lines that I was like, oh, this is Adam and he's gonna be the opposite of what you expect. It was based on like their character arcs and their like who they were. Like, so Zainab came and she's based on somebody, and that the person she's based on is very vocal, doesn't let up a fight, doesn't sees things through the end. She even like took there was like an article that came out that was really, really Islamophobic, and she didn't just like write a letter to the editor. She actually took it to like the press council and went there and defended until the person was taken. Yes, was given a demerit for their journalism, right? She went right to like over months. And so that was like Zainab's character was based on that. So it wasn't like, oh, this is the girl, I'm going to make her like this. It was like, that was the character. And then for Adam, and I was also looking at like Zainab was looking at like the world and like fixing the world. And she was like outer. And Adam was internal and like inner. And he's also contributing to the world and being active, but it's like a little, his action is in a little smaller, closer to him. And that came also from, personalities that I have in my life who are like that, who make change in little ways in their own little circles. So yeah, it was just a reflection of diversity that I saw in my life that I didn't get to see. In as much in books. Yeah.
I love that. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite elements of the story, and I think one thing that a lot of Muslim reviewers especially really appreciate, is the way that you incorporate the Islam into the story. So the Islamic journeys and lessons and the journey that the characters go on. There's a scene with the dog, if anybody has read the book, and how Zainab kind of refers back to a story from the Quran to kind of help her with that situation, right? And there's scenes with Adam and Zainab praying, and the faith element of the story is very present. So I was wondering if you could tell us how important you think it is as a Muslim writer to incorporate those elements of faith particularly for Muslim readers, into the stories that you write?
So yeah, so I'm a very character-led writer. Like, I don't think of plot first. Maybe people see that about my books, like, so I'm very plotty, but like I lead with character. So if it makes sense to the character, like, I will bring it in. And with Zainab's character, like, she's a person who it's natural for her to, like, pray and stuff. So that was part of, like, writing her reality. And for Adam, as somebody who's newly discovered Islam, um, you know, I just based it on, like, actually my husband, he converted, he reverted, people call it, to Islam when he was 9 years old. And so, like, I know some of his, like, journey. So that was reflecting some of his journey, because like Adam told his mom, like Adam told his dad, that he wanted to practice and become a Muslim. My husband told his mom, right? So that part of, like, Islam being part of their lives was character, like, based. And it's also, like, it's just, like, part of my life growing up. And it was like, it was a seamless part of my life in terms of, like, I would pray and then, do watch my movie, or, like, it was
Yeah.
like, it was just like a part of me. And that doesn't mean that it was, like, perfect part. It was like, you struggle to do the things that, you've grown up with. And so, but it was just a part of the characters, and I just wrote it like that. And yeah, so I didn't get to see it very much growing up, like, Muslim identity as being, like, seamless, right? Like, as being, it's not something to focus on. It's just something that just wear, like, without thinking, almost, it's just, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that well, but yeah.
And I think you answered it perfectly, and I'm glad to hear that insight from you about that, because that was one of my favorite aspects of the book as well. But I have many favorite aspects of the book. And another one is the way that you decenter whiteness, and we were talking about this, and there's a scene in the book where Zainab talks about white feminism and the ways that it excludes Muslim women, as opposed to look at the ways in which they define liberation for themselves. So your books really do a good job at decentering whiteness and kind of, moving away from Islamophobic or Orientalist ideas of what a Muslim woman is or what Muslims are and what Islam means. So I was wondering if you could, like, why do you think that discussion is relevant to Zainab's story?
Well, so that was again, it was character based, but it was also something that white feminism had harmed me a lot growing up. Because it was, like, at the heyday maybe of it when I was growing up, and it was the only way to show that you were interested in equal rights and, like, rights for all. And that was the only, like, there wasn't, intersectional feminism. There was no discussion really about those things. And so I felt like, because I felt growing up that I was really, like, I was a feminist in the sense that I believed in, equity and equality, and for all. But there was no space for me in it. And white feminism a lot sided with Islamophobia over and over and over again. And that was just, like, so from when I was, like, around 17, 18, I was, like, really dedicated to, like, finding out, like, the roots of Islamophobia. And it was just something that I was interested in. I studied mass media studies for that. Like, my whole focus in mass media, like, my honors thesis and stuff, was on the portrayal of Muslim women over time. And it was, like, going back to, like, the earliest sources to, like, the modern day, which at that time was the 90s, but, like, what that looked like, because it was really, really intrigued by, like, how is it that it came about that people took away so many women's agency of, like, thinking that they were oppressed, like, without them knowing, as if like we don't have minds, you know. And when a lot of like all my friends and you know that people that I knew, and even like when I travel, the Muslim women I met, they weren't that what that looked like that. They weren't the oppressed people that you saw in movies and books and stuff. So, and I just, even like recently I had this thought that like even my perception of like my parents' background is originally from India. And I remember as like a new, like, I think I was in my tweens, you know, when I was still like, I was really a voracious reader. I was reading really like adult stuff. And I remember reading this one book by a white woman that was set in India. And I still remember this scene because it really shaped how I thought about my heritage. And there was a scene where the young girl, every day she had to stir boiling water with her pinky. And while she was being told, you are a woman and this is your destiny. And this is why a white woman writing about like Indian families. And I remember reading that and being like, oh, this is horrible. And then subsequent visits to India, I would kind of look around for that. It really kind of shaped, and like I was kind of looking for confirmation of the bias that a white person had put into my head about my own heritage. And it was only recently when I was thinking about, oh my gosh, how much I had to like we have to unpack and decolonize our minds.
Yes.
And how much of a fight that is, right? So when I had the opportunity to put something in Love from A to Z about white feminism, I was just like, I'm just going with it, and I'm just gonna put it there.
Colonize your mind, SK Ali 2020. Write it down. My final question before we get to the Q&A section is building off of what we just talked about and decentering that whiteness. You know, Muslims in the media are often portrayed in a very particular way. We've seen examples up till recently, right? And, you know, there's just a very narrow frame in which Muslim stories are told. So I wanted to know, like, you know, you're a huge advocate for Muslims not having to forfeit their identity and to become more palatable to a Western audience. So could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So so just the fact that our stories are being published in a landscape that's kind of informed by stereotypes of Muslims that have existed for generations. There's always going to be that like that eye shed on, like, editorial eye, publisher eye, that comes with all of this like you know, baggage of like what Muslims are and what they look like. So I was fortunate. I always think like I was really, alhamdulillah, I was really fortunate because while I grew up like wanting to be a writer from like when I was 11, I used to write, like, my stories were all like white characters because that's what I mostly saw around myself. And it was only when I got to university.
Did she get disconnected?
Oh, sorry. When I read
for a second, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so when I read like
yeah.
Oh, okay. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I read like African authors, South Asian authors, indigenous authors, it was my first exposure to authors that were not from Europe or, you know, Eurocentric. So the Eurocentric narrative wasn't the focus. And when I read those, like, I still remember reading my first real full novel was by an African author. I have to locate his name, but I remember being like, wow, like, you're allowed to, it was kind of a permission to really explore it and my identity. And so I had a professor who was really interested in like me writing that way. So from that experience of just like, you know, from in my 20s, just like working on that and just being raw with like my identity and not like writing to the white gaze, because he was like, no, give me your like your raw stuff. And it was a lot of anger, you know, at that time, it was a lot of anger coming out. And he really liked it and he encouraged it. And So when I think about like all the people who like kind of let me be with my voice, they were all people who believed in a just world. And like my first 7th grade teacher, she was the only teacher that ever brought diverse lit into our classroom. She brought Indigenous voices into our classroom. And that was the only experience of that. I had one experience in high school later, but it was just like a very small one. But she brought Indigenous literature, and she was the one who encouraged me to write. She was like my first person who said, "You're a writer." So so her and my other professor, and then I was really fortunate to work with Zareen Jaffrey, who's the only Muslim editor in publishing at that time. And so she also let me be, you know, like she appreciated that part of me, and like that part of writing without the white gaze. And I have to say that like because I had critique partners who were like non-Muslim, who told me, you know, they didn't understand some things. Saints and Misfits has more parts that are like halal means this and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then as we went on, we got inshallah in Arabic with no meaning, you know, like there's no translation, right? Yeah, and it was okay. And I'm fortunate, like I'm really fortunate. I got to work with this editor, and that readers had moved along in the conversation. That like a very like I never saw. I don't think I saw any reviewers really like mentioning how that bothered them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that there was like other words, or you know, other than English words. So that I'm yeah, I think I'm happy to be publishing at this time when there's more people talking about these issues.
Yeah, amazing. That was fantastic. Now we've
Thank
reached
you.
the point where we will be moving on to, yeah, we'll be moving on to the reviewers and the Muslim reviewers and their questions. As I said, I have 2 Muslim reviewers who will be asking questions today. The first one I'm going to unmute is Tahirah.
Yeah.
So Tahirah, if you're ready, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum, Callie. I'm trying not to fangirl. I'm going to keep it professional. So my question is, so for, even though we have more access to like Muslim literature, especially in YA, it is still a very like small portion of YA. And as Muslim women, we deal with a lot of that pressure of like looking like the perfect Muslim and presenting as like perfect Muslims. And so like Saajid and so many other people, your books were some of my first introductions to Muslim YA literature. Like Love from A to Z was my first Muslim story between like 2 Muslim people, love story. And just so many firsts for so many people. So did you ever feel like that pressure of wanting to write these characters that are like real and authentic and human, but also knowing that this, you're kind of like representing Islam, or the way that this can potentially come across to so many people who've never been exposed to it before?
That's a really good question. Thank you. I actually never thought about like what it looks like after a book is published, like while I was writing it, my first book, Saints and Misfits. So I was just like writing what I didn't see and what I wanted to see on the shelves, you know. And so it was only after when it got published, actually, like even when it got accepted for publication, I wasn't thinking of like the reception. I don't know why. Now I'm like thinking, why didn't I think of that? Like I was just like, oh, I was just like, because I've been, you know, working so long. Like it took me 10 years from the time I decided that I wanted to write something. So I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm getting published. That was the only thing in my head. Then afterwards, like it was interesting, because then, you know, there was different kinds of like input, like, okay, you know, like I just kind of felt like, why some people were like, why are you examining an issue within our community? And then some people are like, oh, like look at this book, this Muslim girl is so brave to take on our community. And I didn't like that kind of like summing up of my book, you know, like I didn't, yeah, and I didn't, it was coming from different sources, not just, you know, non-Muslim community, Muslim community. It was like different sources. And so then I had to like really like reflect on like my audience too, right? Because I was really, I think Saints and Misfits, I was really kind of writing for myself and like to get things out. And then for Love from A to Z, I was like, I was writing for like the girl that I was then and the young readers, like young readers now who don't get to see much of themselves in different, like the different ways. And so then it was like a more conscious decision of like, but my reception again, like in terms of my reception, I really like my treasured part of my readership is my Muslim readers. Like they're primarily who I write for. Like their input counts the most to me. So yeah, so then if other readers like come on board and like find the story, you know, resonates and stuff, then I'm happy. But I don't know, like I think the most important thing for me is like, what do my Muslim readers think about it? And yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, you did. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering. I love that.
Well, you also talked about the perfection thing. Yeah,
yes.
like I never even thought about like, oh, this is gonna be like one of the few like YAs with Muslim characters. I never like, I guess, framed it like that. It was only after when people were saying, oh, like, you know, here's a few books out there, and then I start to think, oh, this is like, it's the landscape is kind of like it's there's a huge gap. Like even though I knew it, but I'm hopeful that there's so many writers and authors with like different takes that the pressure doesn't have to be on like one person. And I know I've like Hannah Al-Kaf, the author, she says, you know, with so little representation, there's so much, you know, expectations, right? Like on the few.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but what we can do is encourage more voices, right? So nobody gets pigeonholed into like, you stand for everything. Like, so there's more on our shelves, inshallah.
I love that. Thank you.
Welcome.
You're muted, Saajid.
Sorry. I was saying thank you so much, Tahirah. And I think I'm muted, SK Ali. On brand for me. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you so much, Tahirah, for your question. I just unmuted Sumaya. So Sumaya, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Sorry, I need to take deep breaths. I'm trying to stay calm because I'm trying not to fangirl so hard because I love your books. I love your writing. Okay. Sorry. Assalamu alaikum. So nice to meet you.
Islam.
Like this is the closest I'm gonna get to ever meeting you, but hopefully, inshallah, one day I'll actually get to meet you in person. But for now, my question is like, because you talked about how when you were writing Saints and Misfits versus when you were writing Love from A to Z, because it felt like you talked about how in Saints and Misfits you kind of feel like you had to guide the readers a little bit when it came to talking about like specific Arabic words that showed up in the book versus Arabic words that showed up in Love from A to Z. And you mentioned how the readers kind of came along with the conversation and that you didn't necessarily need to guide them as much anymore. So my question was your writing journey, like when you started writing versus where you are now, what are things that you noticed about how you grew as an author particularly, and what you noticed about your writing journey that kind of changed as you wrote every new story and like as you also collaborated with other authors as well?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. As like thinking of as a writer, I'm always like searching for the best way to do like my writing and my book. And what I noticed is that every project I do a different way, and I kind of don't like that because I'm like, you know, like I should have one way. I always think, because I don't know, it just feels like that's how you do things. But I just try different ways, and I have to say the way that I wrote Love from A to Z was actually the best way. so far that I've like attempted. But it's so the opposite of like who I thought I was, because I don't know if you guys know the term pantser and plotter. Pantser, yeah, okay. So pantser is like somebody who doesn't outline anything, doesn't organize or plan anything, and just writes as the inspiration, like the characters talk to you and stuff. So I was always like the pantser, and that's how I relied on, like, I kind of felt like I relied on my creativity to come from pantsing. And then with Love from A to Z, it was like all plotted, and it was all like outlined, because I sold it on an outline to my publisher. So it was so different, because I was just writing what I already like knew was going to happen. And I kind of was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so boring, because I already know what's going to happen. But it was interesting too, because I get to put like little, things and add to it. But it actually saved a lot of time, and I feel like the plot was a little bit like better than with Saints and Misfits, where I was like, okay, so what's going to happen next? And what's going to, it was just like going by my whims. But with Love from A to Z, with 2 voices, there was a lot of plotting and like a lot of mind, like just work that I had to do to figure it all out before I sat down to write. And then with the Saints and Misfits sequel, I did like half plotting and half pantsing, and I do not like that. That was like, it was like so, I don't know, it was just so difficult. And I think it was my most difficult book to write because of that. So people always say your second book is the most difficult, but I found my third, and I think some people say that, like the third is, now people are saying the third is, but yeah, Love from A to Z was like where I found like, so I might go with that process, but also I might try something new. I just like trying new things too. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Hope I answered it.
Thank you so much, Samaya, for your question. We had one question that was submitted by another fellow Muslim in the book community, London Shah, who is present in the chat. Yes, and London says, you are one of my very favorite authors, and Love from A to Z remains one of the best contemporaries I've ever read. How do you write such realistic, nuanced characters? Asking for a friend.
Oh, well, I'm surprised you're saying that, because London is one of my favorite authors.
Light at the bottom of the world.
Yeah, I love The Light at the Bottom of the World. I loved it. I felt like I was just like, oh my gosh, this like reading experience of just falling into a story and like being immersed. And that's a pun, because it's set under the sea. So, and it was just like such a wonderful world building that happened. And it was just so easy. Like sometimes with world building, I find like I get lost sometimes. With London's world, I could see the whole thing. It was just beautiful. So London, yeah, you're one of my favorite authors. So characters, I don't know. I think it's because I lead with characters, like I said so many times. I have to know who they are in my head. I draw them. I do storyboards with their scenes. Like I just need to know like who they are myself. And with Adam and Zainab, I just know them so much. I don't know how many of you read the Eid story I wrote. Did you guys read it? I don't know who read it, but
I didn't get to read it.
Okay,
Saajid,
you
can Maya. I'm just awful, okay?
I read it. It like 5 times. It was perfect. It was amazing. I loved it. It was beautiful.
I read it as well. It was amazing. I loved it. I cried. It was everything.
Yes. Agreed. Yes.
Saajid, it's still available. It's still available. So you can.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was like a limited time thing.
No. It was just I was just playing with you. That I was like, it's Eid. So,
I'm not good with sarcasm, Saajid.
No, sorry. Yeah, so like when I was writing that Eid story, I was just like, I told my agent, I'm like, I just want to keep writing Adam and Zainab, because they just come so easily to me. They like, I just like I just feel like I know like who they are inside out, like, and so yeah, so I you know, I think I just need to know who they are, what they're about, and it really helps that Adam and Zainab really reflects like, you know, people in my life really well. So like, you know, who Zainab is based on, I can just call her up and go, what would you do if this was happening? And she'd be like, this, and then I'd be like, okay, Zainab, calm down, and then I'll just write it. And with Adam, a lot of Adam is my husband, and so like I just, you know, and he's a mixture of like my husband and like other people in my family, so I'm able to observe and see that and apply it. So yeah, and so when everybody's like, I want an Adam, I always tell them Adams are available. Adams are around.
Get you an Adam.
Are you sure? Because it feels like they're not. I'm just saying.
No,
It doesn't feel like they're around.
Talk about it. Yes.
Yes, they are. Yeah. So and you know what? I'm just gonna give you guys like a little thing, but like there may be more Adam and Zainab coming. I don't know. So so just this group, keep it to yourselves.
Oh my
God. Having a heart attack.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. I'm fine. Okay. I can keep it together. I promise. I can keep it together.
Oh my god, I love it. Okay, so Adriana, I want to hand it over to you now. Adriana, my wonderful, amazing co-host, has been monitoring the chat. So did you get any questions from any of our other participants?
I have not yet, so if anyone wants to drop any last minute in, you're welcome to. But we did have a comment from Humaira. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. That is really cute. It just says, SK Ali, your books are the best when it comes to Islamic representation, and the way you've represented Muslim men and women and just Muslims in general is beautiful. And they love from A to Z. They love all your other work. So I thought that was cute, and I thought I would share that. Did you want me to ask any of mine, Saajid, or?
Samina said that they posted a question. Samina, you want to post it just again, just so that we can.
There's a lot happening here. There's a lot of joy happening in the chat.
Maybe you could ask one of your questions that you had prepared, and that we could
So you kind of talked about it a little bit right now, but you did recently release that special Eid short story called The Eid Gift, which is connected to Love from A to Z, which you mentioned it was kind of different for you to write. So did you always want to write that additional story, or was there something that inspired you to write it and share it with other people?
Yeah, so I think it was just like reader response, like, and I wrote it as like a gratitude for all my readers, because I didn't expect like all the love that the book got, and so it was just like, okay, you know, readers would love to see what it looks like when like they actually got together and they want to see them making out. Okay, so I was like, let me do that for them. So that was, and then actually, like, when I was thinking of what it would look like in terms of a story, so this, you know, has anyone read the story by O. Henry, The Gift of the Magi? So it's like this story about like this really poor couple, and it's a Christmas story, and it's a poor couple who like they don't have money to give each other Christmas presents. So like the woman she's got really long hair, she cuts her hair to sell it, to buy like a band for her husband's watch, and for his treasured watch, and he sells the watch to buy her a clip for his hair. So it's like, you know, it's like that. So when I thought about that story and how I loved that story when I was young, I was thinking, you know, what would Zainab sacrifice and what would like Adam sacrifice? So if anybody hasn't read the story yet, I don't want to spoil it. So Saajid, I don't want to spoil it for you, but yeah, it's based on that. And I just wanted to put cats in, like a cat into a story because, you know, cats, I love cats, and you know, and Adam loves cats and stuff. So it was like, that was all of, yeah. So no, it was just something like I wanted to do to appreciate all my readers. And then when, you know, just when my publisher heard about it, they just said, do you want to write more Adam and Zainab? And I was like, yeah, maybe it too, you know? Yeah.
You're right. We appreciate it, and we do love kissing. So thank you for that. Saajid, did you find the other question? Because I was scrolling like a mad person, and I am dumb and I can't find it.
Oh no, I found it. They said that it's not really a question; it's more advice. They're working on a Muslim youth-oriented resource for their doctoral dissertation, and they have also been kind of struggling with that same decolonizing and translating themselves and translating the Muslim experience. So I guess they were asking like advice on how to kind of, I guess, decenter whiteness. I hope I'm interpreting their question correctly, but I guess they were asking advice for that.
You mean when they're writing? I wonder
yeah,
if it's when they're writing.
Yeah, it's more like nonfiction though, because they're writing like a dissertation. So like.
Yeah. So like I think like I don't really imagine an audience when like I'm writing, except like, you know, like I think sometimes when you're writing without decolonizing your mind, you're thinking of like what the receiver is going to make of your words. And I think to take that away, you need anger. Honestly, you need anger. Because I wasn't able to take it away until, like, from my own mind, until, like, I got to university and I was seeing, you know, just the lies kind of that I'd been, like, fed for so long, because all of the works that I'd gone to school with was Eurocentric works, and it was all like that was the only people that existed. So when I got angry enough that I was like, this is like denying humanity for so many people, and just getting anger, and that anger is an emotion that you need to like shake things off. And so I remember it's like I was just like, no, I'm not letting any of that in into when I write. And so when I said that my early writings were really angry, that was like a part of like decolonizing my mind. It was a part of it. So I think it's like, and then it's not also like to prove to the white gaze that, look, you think we're oppressed, we're not oppressed. It's not to prove to them. It's not to like make a point. It's just to record your own stories. For like, I always call it in terms of like, for me, I always see it as like, if we were to look back on our time, like on this earth, and like everything that's collected about people, like of our identity, and if you collect them and you put them in a time capsule and said, this is the truth about these people, when you think about what does that look like? And for me, thinking back of when I was young, what it looks like for Muslim people is that we're terrorists, we're oppressed, we're like all of these things that had nothing to do with my life and the lives of my friends. So for me, it comes from like taking all that in like, and shoving it aside and being like, no, this is the reality of the truth of our lives. And we're just going to write it regardless of like who's going to like push back on it.
So for the last couple of minutes of the chat, what we usually do is we give the authors an opportunity to tell us about some upcoming things. So I know we could expect more books from you in the future, as we talked about in the chat, but is there any like time frames you might want to share? Are there any upcoming events that you'll be a part of, interviews that you might want to let people know? Anything in particular that you want to promote?
No, just that like I mentioned, the paperback is coming out, and I know that like everyone's like, but it's not this cover, but it's still you know, it's still a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a poster, a movie poster. So that's what's coming out. There's some announcements that's gonna come out. Like one of them is gonna be about the sequel, the title, which somebody over here might know the title already, but so
Saajid, is it you? Is it you, Saajid? Because you look like you know. You look like you know. I need
You look
tell me
guilty.
what the title is. Tell me right now. I can't wait. I'm sorry. I'm so impatient.
yeah,
Saajid,
so the
think you know.
so the title,
Your face says like you know.
yeah, so the title reveal and the book reveal is gonna the cover reveal is gonna happen, and there's a little something like added that's gonna be, I don't know what I can share from my publisher really, but like, yeah, that's gonna, I don't know when the reveal is gonna happen, but the book I can tell you is coming out. It's a long time away. It's coming out next year because it's a wedding season book, and so you know, wedding season is later in next year. So that, and then there's 2 other announcements, and then I'm still working on that Istanbul love story, but now it's become an work, so it's not so out. Just wanted to like adult love story, and that's the thing that I'm working on, and on the project with Adam and Zainab. So no,
I think you kind of you were a little bit shaky there. I didn't really catch that last part. Sajda.
Oh no.
Oh no, in the
Oh,
ninth
no.
hour. Oh.
This is a travesty. What is happening? I need to know.
Islamophobia.
I don't know what the book is about.
Oh my god.
I don't care.
This
Oh,
is
no.
un-Islamic. I can't believe that.
Oh my god.
What are we gonna do now?
Why?
Oh, she disappeared from my screen. Is she still there?
Oh my god.
No. Oh no.
Keep her
Bring
in
her
the waiting
back.
room. Maybe she'll come
I
back.
can't breathe. I can't. I'm losing my.
One thing I was going to, let me see the participant. One thing I was going to ask her to say, because I forgot to ask her, is where you could find her online.
Yes.
So she at SK Ali Books on Instagram, and I believe Twitter as well. Let me just double check that.
I'm gonna DM her and ask her what she was gonna say.
All I heard was
Twitter, her
Istanbul.
name is
That's it.
Saajda, right? Her name is @Saajda, right? And her Instagram is @SK Ali Books.
Yeah,
So if you're looking
SK
to find her on social media, you can find her there, and you could probably find her on her author website. It's probably.
Why did you just have the book right there? I'm crying.
Yeah, skalibooks.com. skalibooks.com.
Should we wait
All
and see
right.
if she comes back or consider that the end?
That
What
might be a
if we
sign.
leave and then she comes back? I'm gonna wait. I don't care.
Yeah, we're all free to wait.
If it's like an hour, 2 hours.
Oh, she's back. She's back.
He's
Somebody's
back.
committed.
Oh, praise
He's
the
back?
Lord. He's back. Is she?
Okay. Let me see. Hold on. Let me find her. Oh no, Saajda.
I don't mean
The
to be
powers of
dramatic, but I swear to
manifestation.
God.
You're back?
yeah,
Is
I
she?
think yeah, I think
Alhamdulillah.
Oh, look at that.
yeah, my phone
Yes.
was on airplane mode because somebody told me to put it on airplane mode so calls don't come in, and then it just got kicked off the Wi-Fi. But I put it on.
Wow.
So, okay, so I think I told everybody about the upcoming stuff, and yeah, and
You were mentioning something about Istanbul. I think
Yeah.
that's what we missed. Yeah.
yeah. So Istanbul is there's a love story set in Istanbul that I wrote it as a YA that I'm turning into an adult book. So that I'm excited about, and we'll hear more news about that after. But yeah, a lot of these things I'm like, do I talk about it or can I talk about it? But yeah, more love stories in the works.
I forgot how to breathe for like 2 minutes right there. I'm sorry. I'm okay.
Maya's having like 8 heart attacks right now. So, um, so
Yeah, I'm having
Sajida,
heart palpitations, but like in a good way. I mean,
Somebody resuscitate her.
So yeah, Sajida, that's it. The only thing I was gonna ask you when you were gone, I kind of did it already. I just basically said where they could find you online, so your website and your social media.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's pretty much it. Thank you so much again, Sajida, for joining us. This
Thank
has
you,
been
everyone.
such an honor.
Thank you, Saajid.
Right.
thank you.
And thank you to my
Thank
co-host
you.
Adriana and my 2 guest reviewers, Tahirah and Samaya. Really enjoyed your presence in this. So
Thank you, everyone.
so usually sometimes participants could stay back after the author leaves to chat about the books they read if you all want to. But thank you so much, SK Ali, for coming. It was really
Thank you.
great meeting you.
Thank you, Saajid. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. All right. Okay, I'm unmuting everybody. Hold on.
Let that
Did I
mic
mute
go.
all?